The following is a GoPowercat.com production.
Man, it seems like every day something comes out new about conference realignment, NIL, transfer portal, teams and schools and conferences realigning, all this stuff. Well, now we've got even something even more new. This college sports tomorrow. It's a new organization that colleges and presidents supposedly are meeting and maybe separating from the NCAA and having just one big super league. We will find out and talk about that today. This is the Big 12 Insiders.
Welcome to the Big 12 Insiders, your Big 12 sports show, presented by Synergy Financial Partners. Now let's go to booming North Texas, home of Studio 73. Here's your host, Brien Hanley.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Big 12 Insiders. This is your man, Big B, Brien Hanley, along with Tim Fitzgerald. Fitz, man, college athletics. I mean, it is just insane. There is a lot of stuff going on today. We're going to get into this. Let's just jump right into it.
Okay.
Let's just jump right in. Look, we have got these presidents and athletic directors, everybody meeting for college sports tomorrow. It's going to be a collection of teams, or I shouldn't say teams, of schools, 70 schools initially, then throw in Notre Dame. SMU's also included in that. And it's supposedly going to be a big super league, which I think a lot of people thought that we're going to anyway, may break away from the NCAA. Lot to unpack. First thing, I think it's a working title because college sports tomorrow, that's not going to work for me, Fitz. That's not going to work. But having said that, tell me what your thoughts on all this are.
The foundation of this makes sense. It's, kind of what Chip Kelly said. Let's get rid of conferences for football and just have one big, college football league. I can get into that. I think in theory, what they're proposing is good, but the SEC and the Big Ten want nothing to do with it, and the Big 12 even didn't take the meeting.
Correct.
You're asking Greg Sankey, the SEC commissioner, who sees himself as the high lord of all things college football, to give up power to someone else.
Correct.
To cede their most important product in a conference, football, to someone else.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen unless this is driven by the presidents. And the SEC and Big Ten are all for a super league. They just don't want to share that revenue with anyone else.
Correct.
They might invite some other schools to join their conferences. They might go to 24 or even 30 each, but they're not going to do 70. They don't want a lot of these schools in, and they could care less about, G5 schools playing their way up. They don't want the soccer model. They want the model where they make the money. That's the only thing they're interested in. Greg Sankey's about what makes us the money, and everything else doesn't matter, even if it's best for college football.
Yeah, that's exactly what it's about. It's always been about money. We've talked several times. It's about big business. And there is no way, just kind of what I thought, unless the school presidents get in the way of all of this and just say, no, this is what we're doing, there is no way that Greg Sankey is going to give up his position, because let's just call it what it is. College football is king in college athletics. The SEC is the perceived king, but they are the king. Let's just call it what it is. They are the king. They have drive the most revenue, the most ratings. So it is the king of college football. So if you're the commissioner of the SEC, you're in charge, regardless of what the NCAA and all of that kind of stuff. When it comes to athletics, he's in charge right now, and the Big Ten is right behind it. So I don't see them giving up that kind of power. Now, again, unless they're forced to do it. Looking for the outside looking in, it's like that article. You're right. These schools didn't even take the meeting. The Big Ten and the SEC said, yeah, we're not interested. Big 12, yeah, we're not interested. It's just, I just don't know. I think it's a grasp at straws that these other leagues are like, yes, let's do it. Yes, that makes sense. Let us have a bigger piece of the pie. Let's all join together. And they're just like, no, I'm sorry. We don't think you're worthy of getting that piece of the pie just yet.
Yep. I find it interesting that Brett Yormark said no to this. So he must know something else is going on,
Absolutely.
because this would benefit the Big 12. It guarantees all of his member institutions a seat at the table. But maybe he also was a realist and looked at this plan and said, noble, but there's no reason the Big 10 and SEC will ever want this.
Yes.
And if they don't want it, it ain't happening.
Correct.
So
Yeah.
there's some really cool things about this plan. There was other things I found appalling, like extended eligibility beyond your 5 years and trades. What the hell are we talking about? We still need to keep the model of college athletics. You need to be a student. If we're not going to have these players be students, to be actual college participants, we're talking semi-pro football, and let's just not even have them related to the college. Let's just lease out the names. Someone else can run it, not the university. This is insane. I don't understand. Trade players in college football? What? You're going to make a guy change schools?
Yes.
Just keep this thing simple. Don't get too complex. Don't overthink this. And if the Big 10 and SEC want a bigger cut, well, maybe you have some kind of performance-based payouts that'll make the school think, hey, I'll make a whole lot more because we're going to win the games. What if you offered Ohio State, Michigan, Alabama, Georgia, hey, you'll have a prorated amount of the money that you don't have to share with Vanderbilt and Northwestern and whoever else. Maybe then the schools will start stepping up. But I just think this plan was dead on arrival once the conferences said, no, we're not even listening.
Well, another thing is that just reading into it, they're trying to lean into, if the schools unionize, that they'll be able, the whole collective bargaining agreement, so then they'll be able to negotiate with them when it comes to NIL and transfer portals and all that kind of stuff. And my first thought with that is, it's not going, I don't think, I say it's not going to. I mean, we've seen some crazier things happen here in the last 5 years. It's not going to unionize. I don't believe that is going to happen. So at least not right now. That's not something that's going to happen. And I'm still going to go back to this fact, Fitz. This is an easy fix. All of this stuff is really an easy fix. Just sign contracts with the athletes, student athletes. Just sign contracts. Anything NIL related, you have to sign a contract saying that, you got to be there a certain amount of time. You go back, you still got 5 years to play for. You can transfer one time for free. And if you're a grad transfer, okay. But you still only can play 4 years. I don't care if you get hurt or not. End of story, case closed. And then all of this stuff goes away. I'm just trying to figure it out.
Yeah, I think everyone is. They're trying to figure out the pathway that saves college football in some way without just totally blowing up the system. Or if they blow up the system, to do it in a fair and equitable way, but the SEC is not interested in that either. So, the problem here is, I think to get to the next step of anything major happening, players need to be unionized. They need to have a representative at the table. That's basically what the courts are ruling. You're making decisions that the players don't have a voice in. And that's been why so much the NCAA has put forth has been thrown out, because the players don't have a voice in this. They're workers without representation at the bargaining table, and that is a problem. I can see that. And while I'm typically not just forming a union over everything or anything, this might be a necessary thing to have one union representing college players, but that'll come with a slice of the pie for the union.
Yes. And, my thing with that is, first of all, and I think we've talked about this before, it immediately comes the biggest union in the history of the United States of America. If that were to happen, that would be the first thing. The second thing is, who are you going to get to run this thing?
No doubt.
That would be the next thing, is who's going to be in charge. Now, again, there's some brainiac at some super smart school that's out there that probably knows a heck of a lot about unions right this very second. That's probably standing up, yes, I can lead this. And they're probably right. But is that what we really want? Is that what the rabbit hole that we want to go down, is having unionized college athletics, where there's a union president going to the negotiation table, dealing with Congress on certain, rules and regulations? Because, when there's a union, there's corruption. So, we all know that. And so is that what we want? Is that the whole, because to me, no. And I'm as big as I'm as big a pro player person as there is out there. I am pro player. But at some point, okay, enough's enough. I agree people should be getting paid. I have no problems with that. And get as much as you can. I have no problems with that. But there's got to be some rules. There's got to be some regulation. There's got to be some stipulation. I know a lot of people hate regulation, but you know what? We're a country of laws, and we have those laws for a reason.
Yep.
And having some regulation in something isn't a bad thing. So I know some people think any regulation is horrific. It's not. And this is the same case. There's just got to be some ground rules that have to be set so it's not chaos. You know,
Yeah.
I'm a person that always says I love chaos at the end of college football season, and I do. But there's chaos, but it's structured chaos. This is unstructured chaos, and it's getting out of control.
Well, I can tell you this. There's probably an organization that would be more than happy to run a giant union of college athletes that really won't be able to trace where the money's going.
Mm-hmm.
I think if a guy shows up at the bargaining table named Slick Tony from South Beach, the union's been hijacked. And look, I joke, but that is a real concern.
Of course it
There
is.
has been union corruption in its leadership. And I know that the college athletes need a voice at the table. They do.
Yes.
But how you pick that voice and how that person, ably represents the opinions of an entire student athlete public that is enormous, as you mentioned. I don't know how they do that.
Yeah.
Maybe it just starts with football players only, because this really is impacting football the most.
Yes and no. I mean, I could see that. But at the same time, I would say, and I would argue, the most valuable person in college athletics today is Caitlin Clark.
Yeah.
And she plays women's basketball. The thing about it is, at a lot of universities, Power 5 universities or Power 6, however you want to look at it, women's basketball is not profitable. It falls into the nonprofit athletic department or athletic sports at most universities. Not some. At most universities, Fitz, they don't make money. So I could see, like I said, having football be a part of it, but I don't know. I would want to get everybody involved, but you're right. That might make the most sense. Here's the thing, going back to this, I think they're calling it the CST. The one problem or one solution that I think they actually are that would make some sense, because it's not sustainable for these schools and the Olympic sports and the non-revenue sports to go across the country and play. Rutgers soccer team going to UCLA soccer team to go play, that's not going to be sustainable for very long. And they're in the same conference. That was one part of this new, I guess, league or super league, whatever they want to call it, that makes more sense is, hey, we're all together. We're going to regionalize everybody and put you in separate pods, but it's regionally, so the travel isn't insane.
Yeah.
That would be something that actually makes sense. The rest of it, I don't know. But to break it down in certain aspects, I think that is something that I think fits the Big Ten. The SEC's kind of regionalized themselves. The Big 12, these conferences are going to have to try to figure that out.
I know. And I don't know how they will. Unless you just, again, we're talking about conference commissioners actually giving up their jobs or lessening their importance. And, I don't know how they get a salary that is the same if you don't have college football involved, because, then they're reforming their conference around regional lines that make sense for all the other sports. It doesn't really work. I noticed on the volleyball schedule for Kansas State that was released, they did do some road trip pairings. Some, people like to refer to it travel partners. It's, not necessarily that, but Kansas State plays Arizona and Arizona State with a day in between on the road. And then they go out to West Virginia and Cincinnati with 2 days in the middle. So, there is some of that going on, which I think is essential. But boy, the structure for all of these sports, and maybe, if you're a conference like, let's say, the Big 10 and the Big 12, because you're right, the SEC's, very compact compared to those two conferences. Maybe you go to 24 teams, 24 schools, and in a lot of these sports, you subdivide yourself into 8 regional conferences for cross country or soccer, and you do some cross scheduling, just like a non-conference game. But you find a way to subdivide your own conference to cut down on these travel expenses.
I don't think it's a problem. Just think about back when there were 12 teams in these conferences before things started going haywire. You didn't play every team in your conference every year. You just didn't do that. They split it up, and let's just take the Big 12 for an example. It was a North and there was a South, and you played everybody that was in your current North or South division, and then you played 3 teams, and that's how it did. And you played home and away 2 years, and then you switched.
Yeah.
You didn't play everybody every year. And that was just fine, Fitz. The same thing in the Big 10, the same thing in the SEC, the ACC. There was nothing wrong with that. And I think you can go back to that. I know what people think is, okay, well, in volleyball or basketball, well, you have to play everybody because you're playing more conference games. I'm like, well, you can also schedule around that and make that work. Look, maybe you do play, if you're Colorado or you're Utah, maybe you do play UCF once. And that's it. You do it on a Saturday, and then you don't play again until Wednesday. Logistics, hey, they pay somebody at the Big 12 conference to make that work. Maybe you do that. But at the same time, it's all just got to make sense. I think you're right. You go to more teams. You bracket out the schedule. Hey, we may not play you for 3 years. That's just how it works. That's just how it works. There's nothing. The ACC actually has that model still, and I think it's a great model. The Big 12 is going to have that model, moving forward. So I think that's the avenue that people got to look. I think you're right when you're talking about that, is that we got to start making some sense out of this stuff.
You know me, I'm a big fan of pod systems. As long as you're divisible by 4, you can divide up your conference. And look, I truly believe K-State, Iowa State, Kansas, and Oklahoma State should be playing every year, or maybe Colorado's in that mix.
Mm-hmm.
Those schools all have Big 12, Big 8 ties together.
Right.
And I think you can make sure you're playing those rivals every year and rotating everyone else and getting in 9 football games. Hell, if you go to a 20 school basketball league, it's pretty easy. You play everyone once, and you have an opponent. For K-State, it would be Kansas. For Utah, it'd be BYU, that you do play home and away. Boom,
Correct.
20 games. You're there.
Easy.
Easy. You get above 20, all scheduling gets a little bit nutty. And really, you do become a collection of either 2 12-team conferences or 3 8-team conferences, because you just can't work around it any other way. It's impossible to play people as often as you would like in a conference, but maybe that's the new reality.
Yeah, I don't disagree at all. Do not disagree at all. We're going to park a quick break here. On the other side, we'll tap back into this, maybe some more solutions. If you've got questions, people, throw some questions in the chat. We will pull it up. First thing I'm going to do after we hear one word from our partners at Synergy Financial Partners, I'm going to get this disco light behind me turned off.
I like it.
And then we will come back.
At Synergy Financial Partners, the mission is to change the way Americans plan for their financial future. Synergy doesn't just offer you a financial plan. At Synergy, the goal is to help you find your best financial future. Learn more at synergyfinancial.com.
Welcome back to the show. Let's head back to the studio.
All right, welcome back to the Big 12 Insiders. Again, this is Big B, Brien Hanley with Tim Fitzgerald from GoPowercat. So I got the disco light turned off. We had a power outage here earlier, about 11 o'clock. Big boom, and then all of a sudden, electricity just went out. And I'm like, uh-oh. Walk outside. It's just like coming outside after the storm. Everybody walked outside to see what's going on. There was probably 25 people out there, and we're all talking. And then all of a sudden, you hear another, and it just comes right back on. I'm like, oh, okay. So that was interesting. But so we're back. Apparently my lights, they wanted to turn disco lights on me. So
I loved it.
So getting back into this, Fitz, I'm trying. I really am trying. But I'm going to say something here that I think a lot of college athletic fans are thinking and maybe don't have a certain platform to say. I am sick of all of this.
Yep.
I am tired of all of this. Look, I understand business. I understand all of this is about business. And I get that part. But we have let the money get in the way of this so much that it's starting to ruin our experience. Now, I don't think it's ruining college football or college athletics. I'm not going to go that far, but it's starting to ruin our experience. And I think when people say it's ruining college football, I think what they really mean is it's ruining my experience with
Right.
college football. It's ruining my experience of enjoying college athletics for what they are creating with all this. Am I wrong to think that?
No. And this shifting of conferences constantly. I mean, Kansas State and Nebraska, KU and Nebraska played in everything since basically the beginning of college athletics, roughly.
Yes.
And then they just moved. And it really hasn't worked out well for Nebraska.
No.
But they move for the money, and everything is money driven. And right now, the biggest problem facing college football is the inequity in the money is making it impossible for those at the top of the financial status to give that up, because they
Right.
would.
Correct.
They would give up money, and nobody's going to do that right now. Just nobody's going to compromise if the compromise is what goes in their pocket, what feeds their budget. And I don't know how they're going to come to any kind of agreement on a way to do a super league involving everyone. I love the idea that it just involved everyone. Nobody gets cut. Then we're going to bring in, these 8 teams from the G5, and they'll play every year, and someone will crawl up and, end up in the top level, and someone will be relegated back down. First of all, I'm not a fan of relegation. Look, this isn't soccer, and I'm kind of tired of that. But if you're going to do relegation, you got to do it across the board.
Yes.
If there's not going to be conferences for football, what's it matter if Northwestern or someone else gets bumped down to the lower level of college football because they're not cutting it? What gives them the right to have this equal share at the table when what they're contributing isn't even close to equal?
Yes.
And that's the next step of this greed, is the conferences will look internal and say, what the hell are you doing with the full seat at this table? You should be back there taking a half share so we can have more, because that's all you're contributing. Correct. It's going to get ugly, Brien, before we even get near any kind of resolution.
Well, you said it before I could even get it out. That's where the problem lies with some of these schools. You take a look at a school like Florida State or a Clemson that are wanting out of the ACC, and they're looking at just what you said, a Northwestern, a Vanderbilt, a Mississippi State. They're looking at some of these schools, and they're like, how are you receiving this much money and you aren't contributing anything close to your conference is what I'm contributing to my conference, or what I would contribute if I was in your conference? How is that? Why are we taking a back seat to them? Why? And it's a big back seat on these yearly outputs to some of these schools. And I think that's where a lot of this comes in. Are like, if we want to compete now, the thing about it is, you can't tell me that you can't compete at Clemson or at Florida State. And they're saying, well, we're not getting, it's $30 million difference. I go, okay, I understand that, but you're telling me you're not getting kids to come to Clemson? I go, once you build the facilities, they're built. I mean, you can't just, you can tear some stuff down, but once you build all brand new facilities, they're still all brand new. I go, so you can only do so much. You can still get people to come there. Their thing is they want the money for themselves. Right. They got to stop with the lying and saying, well, we can't compete. We can't get any. Yeah, you can get whoever you want to go to Florida State and Clemson. You just haven't been good enough maybe to win. I go, but what it really comes down to is you're not getting the same amount of money. And that's what you want. You want the same amount of money. Doesn't have anything to do with facilities, coaches' salaries. It's to the pocket of you, which, right. Okay, but that's what it is.
This belief that money is the deciding factor in success or failure isn't supported by anything we've ever seen. Now, I will admit that excessive amounts of money means you can be the bully and get your way.
Right.
We see that on social media. And I truly believe that this addiction to the dollar is so out of whack with what college sports is supposed to be about. Let's keep this in mind. Kansas State, I always keep coming back to that because that's the school I cover, has one of the smaller budgets in the Big 12. Can you tell? No.
No, not at all.
No. Now, what's reflected in that is a lesser number of sports. There's no softball, no wrestling, much to my dismay. But on the football field, until the last 4 years or so, K-State beat Texas more than they lost to Texas.
Correct.
K-State was playing head to head with Oklahoma at 500 over the last 10, 20 years. So it's not always the money that decides it. And just trying to sort everything out by how much money you have isn't going to work. Look, if Florida State and Clemson are worried about more dead weight, joining conferences with more dead weight, the one thing that the Big 12 does offer is a lot of equality across the table. They're not carrying anyone, but they don't also have the lead dog right now to pull the sled. And maybe those schools come in and offer that. I don't think that's what they'll do because money. They'll go back to the money and say, well, the Big 10 and SEC are just going to give us more money. Okay. Is that going to translate to success for you? Because it won't. Yeah. It doesn't. Those aren't.
It never does.
That those don't add up. That those one doesn't equal the other. You might have success, but it isn't because of the money.
Correct. Perfect example of that would be Texas A&M.
Right.
Texas A&M has all the money in the world.
Yep.
And how much success has that turned into on the football field, basketball court, baseball, all of it? You can just name it, and it hasn't. So you're right. I guess one thing for me, and again, I'm a fan. I'm just a fan of college athletics. So for me, that's where my perspective always comes from is what do I want as a fan? Even though I'm pro player, I look at it from a fan's perspective. What do I want to have happen? For me, I think I just want, let's stop. The television markets are what they are. You sign a deal, you can't get in and out, blah, blah, blah. I know they're going to court for all of that. But at some point, what's the end game? Like what is going to be the end game with all of this, Fitz? Are they just going to are we going to tear down conference after conference after conference until there's just one team? Or are cooler heads going to finally prevail with all of this? Because as much as we hate NIL or we hate the thought of what it's doing because it's ruining our experience, it's part of it. It needs to stay, but it needs to be regulated. Transfer portal. I mean, again, we've talked about it at nauseum. Could be changed tomorrow, literally tomorrow, if somebody just did something about it. What is going to be the end game with all this? Cooler heads prevailing. Look, I know we like to think that, but when money's involved, cooler heads usually don't prevail. So what's the end game here, Fitz?
Well, we've all been in one of those corporate meetings where it maybe gets a little heated or, a little exchange of ideas and people aren't agreeing. And then Dan stands up and says, can we slow down here and lower the temperature and just have a civil discussion? And everyone looks at Dan and says, shut up, Dan.
Yeah.
That's what just happened. The cooler heads came to the table and said, here's a plan that could save college football, break it separate from the NCAA and conferences. And 3 of the major conferences said, shut up, Dan. Yeah. So as long as we're in this kind of momentum of greed, which we are, I mean, it definitely is. We've seen, the Big 10 come in and steal teams and the SEC come in and steal teams. And then the Big 12 stole teams. And then, it's just now snowballing and it's gaining momentum, so much momentum that the ACC is about to get flattened. And after the ACC is flattened, I think that snowball might turn around and come back to the Big 12. I think that's where Sankey and the Big 10 are at. Hey, let's just destroy everything until it's just us and we make all the money. I truly believe that's their thinking. They literally give no shits about everyone else. None. They just want the money for themselves.
I mean, it can get lonely out there by yourself. I mean, but I get it. You have all the money, you have all the power, and then what do you do with it? I love your idea that you've brought up many times, and I think it's smart. Sooner or later, people are going to get tired of you bullying us, and we're just going to say, you know what? You can have it. we'll
Right.
go somewhere else and we'll play.
Right.
And if enough teams band together, and we're going to keep you out of our thing, we're going to keep you totally out of it. You have all this money, you have all this power, you stay over there. That's fine. You didn't want us. Well, everybody else is going to come over here, and we are going to park and we're going to play. So you guys just play against yourselves, and that's it. And I think if it comes to that, they'll have to come back to the table. And at that point, Fitz, they will have ruined college athletics, unfortunately.
Yeah. At some point, if you're getting bullied, you got to stand up.
Yes.
And even if that means you don't get to sit at the cool kids table, that's just the reality. You got to make these choices. The unfortunate part of this is the NCAA, because does anyone, after, even seeing what they've done with the women's tournament this year and what a disgrace this has been to women's athletics, do you really want to give them a football playoff to run at a Power 5 level playoff? No, you don't. But that, if there was a feasible organization to step forward and say, we'll run football and we'll take care of it, maybe we'd get there, because then the Big 12 and anyone else that wants to play ball can sit down and say, okay, we're going to have a championship. If you guys want to do something outside of the NCAA, that's fine, but you'll be outside the NCAA for everything. You'll just have your own championship. You can crown your Big 10 SEC champion every year, have fun. Maybe you'll get better ratings. We don't care. We're going to do our thing. And it might come to that level of hardball to get anything to happen. But you know what? I feel like if they told the Big 10 and SEC, leave and do your own thing, they'd say, sure, we'll do that. But I think they're miscalculating their reach, because I've said it again with what you brought up. Nobody's going to watch outside of those two conferences. It's going to become a division in college sports that most viewers won't cross.
Correct. That's exactly right. Now people watch because, hey, we could play. We're all together. We're all bonded and banded together in this thing. And we're all going to watch because, hey, we might play in the playoff. We might play in a bowl game, blah, blah, blah. It's actually good football. We're going to watch. But if we have no chance to play you at all, like no chance, then why would I watch you?
Yeah.
Like, what would be the purpose of me watching? People don't do that. Fans of teams, they don't do that. They don't just watch teams that just, I'm just going to watch them because I want to watch them. It's not going to happen, man. I've said this many times, in the NFL, hopefully they listen. You can oversaturate something. And even though football is king in this country when it comes to athletics, NFL is starting to oversaturate itself with this Thursday night football business, especially when they put on the terrible games that they put on.
Yeah.
I think it's an absolute nonsense. Talking about safety, but that's a different conversation, but it's absolute nonsense. The same thing will eventually happen with football if we continue down this path. We're going to oversaturate this thing. I think it's silly. I think that its greed is getting in the way. And at some point, I don't know who it's going to be, though, but somebody has to step up and just say, enough's enough. Let me ask you this question before we take our next break. If Brett Yormark, and just talking about the Big 12 conference, if they can get this basketball TV deal done this summer, which I think they have to be, the sooner the better.
Right.
If they could get it done today, they should get it done today. If they step up and get this thing done, do you think that puts a halt or puts a freeze on everything else? And like, oh, well, wait a minute here. They were able to do this. How are they able to do this? Maybe we need to take a back seat or just take a step back and stop, pause, and understand what's going on here.
For those who don't fully believe that Brett Yormark sees over the horizon, he's been proposing, and we always say it's basketball, but really it's other sports. It's non-football. He's been proposing a separate contract for football and everything else, which is led by basketball, which the Big 12 excels at.
Right.
That's what every conference would have to do if football broke off. And he's been working on this. Yes, he's got contractual obligations right now to ESPN and Fox, but eventually that will open up. When people were trying to say Gonzaga is going to join this year, I'm like, no, they won't, because there's no movement on the basketball side of this contract. You don't add a school that's just going to subtract money.
Correct.
You wait until you got the new contract coming in before you start doing that. And he's been on the forefront of this, trying to break basketball and the other sports out separately, so that those rights get the money they should. And now I'm reading that some believe networks are even underpaying for college football, which honestly I find to be amazing. I think they're overpaying in many situations. Yeah, Ohio State, Michigan's worth a lot of money, but when Purdue travels to Rutgers,
there you go.
Boy.
Yeah, I totally agree. We're going to take one quick break. Again, a word from our sponsor, Synergy Financial Partners, and we will be back to wrap up the rest of the show.
At Synergy Financial Partners, the vision is to build the world's largest consumer financial education and empowerment company. Synergy doesn't just offer you a financial plan. At Synergy, the goal is to help you find your best financial future. Learn more at synergyfinancial.com.
Welcome back to the show. Let's head back to the studio.
All right, welcome back to Big 12 Insiders. Again, this is Brien Hanley, Tim Fitzgerald. Look, I want everybody to understand we're going to continue to talk about this.
Yeah.
Look, we're going in, and let's just be honest with this, Fitz. We're going into the spring/summertime, and this is stuff that we're going to talk about. Football is not here. It's over. Basketball is about to be over. I think we're just going to continue to talk and revel in what's going on. I think it's important for you guys. Hey, hit the comments section, shoot an email over, whatever the case may be. Give us some topics for us to talk about that you guys want to hear about, because as we get into the summer months, we're going to dabble away from maybe talking about school so much, Fitz, and we're going to get into talking about more topics like this. And it might be we talk about it 2 times, 3 times in a week. But I think it's important that we keep everybody up to date on exactly what's going on around college athletics.
Nobody wants Big B doing an entire show on his most recent pool party.
Well, hold on. Wait a minute now. My pool parties are fun. They're fun.
I can't wait to go to one. But yeah, I mean, in all honesty, if stuff continues to perpetuate with the ACC, it's going to be a big topic for us.
Yeah.
And it's this realignment's driven a lot of things, and it's an interesting topic. It really is. I think the ACC, whatever's going on with them, is the most fascinating of all of these, because it's almost like a draft is going to take place of schools going to these conferences, and the SEC and Big Ten have the first selections if they want them. But there's still going to be other teams available, and then maybe the ACC reforms, bringing in some of these other schools. Does that leave them at the Power 4 status? I don't know, but
right,
we'll find out, and it's going to be fun to discuss.
One last question before we end the show today. So the ACC falls apart basically because what's being challenged is the grant of rights. Just for everybody to keep everybody up to date on exactly what's going on. A grant of rights that runs through, was it 2035 or 2036?
2036, but there's an out in 27 for ESPN not to
renegotiate. Correct. If they choose to get out, and they can basically disband the conference.
Right.
The two things going on with it. One, if ESPN wanted to right now, they could renegotiate this thing today, and then everybody would stay in the ACC if they wanted to do that.
Yeah.
But they're not going to.
They're not.
So that's the first thing. The second thing is, we all thought that grant of rights was ironclad. Can't get out no matter what. Well, we're about to find out that doesn't mean anything. What's going to keep, let's just say SEC and the Big Ten change their minds and say, you know what? We want to go to 30 teams. What's for them to say, okay, we want you, and you, and they're in the Big 12. What would keep a team from getting out? I don't think anything fits. I think if you want to get out, I think you can get out now.
Yeah. You know what's really interesting? At some point, the networks are going to have to say, well, hold on. You want to take 4 teams from the Big 12? You're going to basically double my price to televise the same games I get now at this price.
Mm-hmm.
At some point, the network's going to say, enough. We're not adding any more money to this contract. If you want to add more games, we'll just show them when we want to. I mean, at some point, the network's going to say enough is enough. We can't pay high dollar for every school.
Right.
And those schools getting high dollar aren't going to give their money back.
Correct.
And again, the next logical step in this is forced relegation.
Mm-hmm.
Conferences kicking members out because they're not pulling their weight. And I don't see any way that doesn't come to reality here pretty soon.
Absolutely. Well, everybody, again, thanks everybody for joining. Again, remember, like, follow, subscribe, continue. We saw a little kick up in subscribers this week. So continue that trend. The Big 12 Insiders on 24/7. It's over on YouTube. Please go subscribe. We're on a race to get to 1,000 subscribers. So we appreciate everybody being over there, subscribing, liking, comment. We're growing as fast as we can, people. It's with you guys. We appreciate it. We will be back next week. We'll see you later.
This has been a GoPowercat.com and Spirit Street production. Please support this show by subscribing to this YouTube channel or follow us on your favorite podcast platform.